Jennifer,
Good morning.
good morning. How are you?
I'm sorry, what did you say? My
Oh, saying good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing all right. Happy it's Friday.
Me too.
I know today's a long one for me. I have two trainings today, so
Ah,
yeah, but it'll be good. I'm excited. The today's subject matter is pretty interesting, so should be good. How's your week been?
so far so good. Yeah. Yeah, and it's Friday.
Hello, welcome, welcome. Hope everyone's doing all right. We're just gonna give it a little bit of time for folks to join.
Hey y'all.
Okay, Polly. You always confuse me when your face pops up. Confuse me.
I know. I want to change it to our logo so it doesn't keep making me like,
That
what?
makes
Bethany's
sense.
here. Yay. Oh no, it's only Polly. How's it going, everybody?
Good. Great
Good.
Friday.
So is everybody ready for a nice weekend or a weekend, whether it's nice or not?
Very ready.
It's the little things, you know. Though I'm not. There's a part of me that isn't looking forward to it because tonight I am going to a farewell party for very dear friends of mine who are moving cross country. It's making me very sad.
Where are they moving to?
Uh, Portland, Oregon.
Oh, Portland's fun.
So y'all are going to get some crazy zany folks. Anybody connected to me, you know, is going to be a little touched in a good way.
Molly,
Hiking trail. What? Go ahead, Abhiya.
I was gonna ask, are you also based out of Florida?
No, I'm in DC.
Ah, okay. Very cool.
And Kafili's in Texas.
What part of Texas? I'm outside of Austin.
Oh, I'm in Dallas.
Very cool.
Hmm.
So whenever you want me to share my screen, Kafili, I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, I think at 35 we'll be good to go.
All
Give
right.
people the usual 5 minute.
So Frida, you said you're getting ready to hike the Yosemite Trail? a friend of mine texted me this morning a picture of her broken thumb. She and her son went hiking for his birthday yesterday. She fell early in the hike and broke her thumb, and she completed the hike. Like, what? So mad respect to you folks who are like hardcore into that. I am
Yeah.
not so much built for that. I think, you know, if you want to make me walk uphill for no good reason, I'm going to need treats.
I think we're ready to go, Paul.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Allegedly. All right. Sorry, guys. Things are going nuts. All right, here we go. Are y'all seeing just the
Yep.
PowerPoint or anything different? Okay.
Yep, we should be good to go.
All right.
All right, y'all. Welcome back for another session of Fundraising Fridays. Today, we are going to be talking about going beyond donor contributions. This is our great, small but mighty, but rapidly growing team here at Progressive Multiplier. Very excited. By the time we meet again, I think our new director of movement group engagement will be starting, and we are currently in the hiring process for our grants and program operations manager. So you'll see a new face on this slide very soon. Again, as a recap for folks who maybe this is your first Fundraising Friday, like who is PM and what are we about? Our goal is to help organizations build a progressive movement of, by, and for everyday people. We do this by organizing and leveraging funding to create on-ramps for progressive organizations to start, strengthen, or scale individual giving and earned revenue programs. We do this through both an online community of practice and our grant making and support program. And we do that to build the progressive sector's revenue generation knowledge and skills so that it can amplify a people-powered movement. And so the groups that we make grants to are in 3 program areas: achieving justice, realizing democracy, and restoring the environment. And our goal is to grow the revenue generation capacity of groups in these sectors to build movements that can create the change needed. Wanted to give a shout out, as always, to our amazing partners at the Resilience Initiative. And then for the folks who are here and present, would be great. I know some folks I think have done it already, but to share your name, org, and role in the chat. And as always, we'll be recording this session and it will be up on the private YouTube channel. The link is there and I can actually put that in the chat for everyone. So we have access to it. Just give me 1 second and I'll get that in for you. Great. So what is actually available through this partnership with Resilience Initiative? So it's a kind of dual fold offering. In addition to the Fundraising Fridays that are now in this new format of one-on-one and 201 tracks that are built on both fundraising fundamentals, but also current trends and next level topics that have been driven by you and your participation. We offer one-on-one fundraising coaching. So each of your orgs, there's a has been allotted between 1 and 5 hours of individual coaching, consulting, or deliverable preparation with the Progressive Multiplier team. So with myself, Polly, or one of the other wonderful people that you saw on the previous slide. And we can help you in a number of different areas, whether that's board fundraising trainings, annual development plan presentations, end of year campaign giving, et cetera, et cetera. So highly suggest that y'all sign up for those one-on-ones. I will put the link in the chat for that as well. Yeah, so to make sure you get access to all the offerings that have been provided. We're very excited and happy to work with y'all. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Michelle Mangle. And again, if you want to watch this session later, share it with your team, or go over any of the other previous Fundraising Friday sessions. They're all on the YouTube page. Put the link in the chat before, but we'll do it again before we all say goodbye later to make sure you have access to it. Great. So our topics for today are why diversify, donor trends, organizing through dollars, different donations, and spoiled for choice. Let's talk about why it's important for your organization to diversify your fundraising patterns. And so seeking multiple forms of revenue generation, especially when you're already successful. So diversification really equals survival for organizations. Having varied forms of revenue generation will protect you financially and programmatically. So for organizations like yourself, you know, it's very often, especially as you're growing, that you may have like 1 or 2 major donors. And, you know, we're all very lucky and grateful and thankful to be able to have access to them, their resourcing and support. But there's always that cloud in the horizon of like, what happens if that goes away? What if their funding priorities change? What if the individual doesn't give anymore? That leaves a gaping hole in your organization, in your ability to fundraise, to pay for program costs, to pay for your staff time. And so being able to diversify will open yourself up to a lot more arms of funding coming in. So you won't be as hyper dependent on 1 or 2 donors really making up the base of your fundraising practice. Yeah, Susan, that's a very common thing to happen. You know, donors, everyone's competing for donors, and you know, it could be something personal that happens. It could be something, you know, they've had a shift, or like if it's an individual donor, like a personal thing that makes them have to stop giving for a while, and you know, that can really throw your plans in disarray. So you want to protect yourself as much as possible. And then from the programmatic standpoint, you know, especially when you're talking about institutional philanthropy, grants come with restrictions, grants come with frameworks, and depending on who the funder is like the level of stringentness and framing that they want for your work. So there is always that push and play and push and pull and tension between organizations and their funders about like what work looks like, what's presentable to a funder, what maybe won't be presentable, the things that they want to see, right? So when you have a diverse funding base, it's much easier for you to say no or to be stronger in those meetings because you're not as dependent on that one funder or that one grant coming in. So I know there's some folks answering this question in the chat already, but yeah, how many different streams of income does your organization have? And you can just pop those in the chat while we keep it going. But it's good to just get a sense of how everyone's setup is made up of right now. But yeah, revenue generation also allows your organization to be super flexible. Unrestricted funding allows orgs to express their creativity, especially C4 organizations. If you have a C4 arm, I'm sure you know, institutional funding is incredibly difficult to find. And even if you're a C3 organization, it's hard for orgs to create new programs or to scale in different ways or to adjust on the fly to emerging trends that they're seeing within their constituency. Because you've agreed, especially if you're doing programmatic grants, you've agreed to get funded for one particular thing, right? So any deviation from that grant agreement and the reason why they originally gave you the money has to be talked about, has to be vetted, you know, and especially if you're working in rapidly evolving spaces, it can be difficult to make those pivots in real time. So it's opening up the floor and asking, you know, feel free to put it in the chat or come off the mic. But how can increased unrestricted funding get you and your organization closer to completing your actual mission and vision?
Starting with webinar, how can unrestricted funding get
Anyway,
you closer to meeting your goals?
415 was closer to what somebody was going to pay for.
425.
That's what I'm saying. Hey, look and say 415, I'll get 10,000 more.
No. that's
Two-
not what-
Pamela, are you responding to the question? I'm sorry, it's a little hard to hear.
I think Pamela was discussing. Yeah, so we're seeing in the chat, it seems like a lot of folks have like 2 or 3 streams, just foundation, small numbers of individuals, a little bit of fee for service. Okay, great.
I'd love to hear
Um,
how folks are trying to move off of foundation funding, or I'm sorry, not move off of, but trying to diversify from having that, you know, such a large share of the funding coming from foundation. Is anybody willing to talk about their work, their struggles or successes?
I don't have a success yet, but we're currently working with Progressive Multiplier to build out our individual giving program and especially like major gifts program. Because our funding has been 96% institutions and foundations. So we just don't want to be so reliant on those. So trying to kind of diversify a little bit more.
Go ahead, Abiha.
So my organization does a lot of field organizing and base building in South Midwestern California. And in the pandemic, something our field organizers kept asking for was to pay our chapter leaders. And you know, it's like, no, we can't pay our chapter leaders. It's like a volunteer, like we're mobilizing, we're building a base, but it's not like a job. And so, but the fact was that there was some of our members were experiencing food insecurity. They were impacted by the pandemic. And that's something that a funder might not necessarily want to fund. And so that's where having like unrestricted individual gifts was super important, because we were able to come up with like a chapter grants program, which you know, gives a stipend depending on like the projects that the chapters do. Additionally, this is a couple of years ago, but there was like this mutual aid effort, and you know, our organizers were like, hey, this is a really great organization doing amazing work in our local community. Can we support them? Can we donate to them? And we're like, you know, management again was like, you know, but because we had unrestricted support, I put out an ask to our alumni who said, yeah, we want to, if it means putting money in the pockets of members who once were, we got a lot of response for that. So I think increasing unrestricted funding gets us closer to the mission of, at least here at Urge, of like centering the leadership of young people without adding like, you know, barriers to that.
Totally. Great. Thank you for that, Abiha and Brittany. Yeah, to your point, Abiha, like there's so many parts of our work that are so nuanced, and we can see like the connective tissue of, you know, this requires investment. But, you know, explaining that to a funder who's not, you know, necessarily in the day-to-day or see your programming at the granular level that you see your programming makes those asks harder. So that's why unrestricted funding is so key, because you can make things move immediately when you need to, right? So you know, if you didn't have youth organizers or they were going without or unable to dedicate time, like that would actually affect your organization's bottom line. And so it's not only an investment in the people, but the work itself. So you've been able to like do that without having to like go through the loopholes of trying to grab the funding from elsewhere. Can go to the next slide, Paul. And so there's no time like the present to start working on this stuff. Whether you're facing a budget deficit, which is, you know, in these current economic times, a lot of orgs are, or whether you're doing really great, you should always be thinking about and exploring new fundraising streams, right? These things and these systems usually take months and years to build and to get up to optimal speed. And so, you know, you definitely want to invest in as much as you can, especially while you have the wiggle room in your budget to do so. You know, you want to buy your umbrella while the sun is shining. Once the rainstorm comes, it's too late. And we've seen that so much in the past few years. Like, you know, we saw in our field post 2016 just a rapid growth of the nonprofit sector in response to, you know, a lot of things that were happening politically in the country, and a lot of people getting politicized, and the money was flowing into our field, and then the pandemic happened. You know, so that upward trajectory got kneecapped, and orgs and the system itself is still trying to recover 3.5 years later. So, you know, if you stay ready, you won't have to get ready. But yeah, just the question, you know, between the inflation, you know, rising wages, and increased costs in general, think deeply internally about like, are you actually falling behind by staying in place? By raising the same amount of money that you raised last year, that money and that resource is actually less valuable for your organization. So you want to catch that now before that compounds year over year, and then you find yourself with a 20%, 25% gap to fill, you know, and you don't have the systems or the infrastructure ready to be able to find new money to help support your work.
Totally. You know, I have to really underscore Kafili's point of like, if you stay ready, you won't have to get ready. My early fundraising life, I had the, you know, just luck, blessings of being trained by folks who were like boomer generation and even older, and they had a very different relationship to money than my generation. Now I'm an Xer, so I might be in a different generation than most folks on the call, but you know, they grew up with you know, like under the, you know, after the war, and
the bottom right, please.
And that really affected the way that they did organizational funding planning. So having that being my orientation into fundraising of like, you have to plan ahead, you have to, you know, have your umbrella ready, has really impacted the way that I've done fundraising in my career. And I can say that, and there's so many situations, crisis fundraising, surge things that happen, you know, like having all of these tools in your tool bag is really helpful. Having all these donors in your list is really helpful.
100%.
I'm curious how many folks feel ready, or how many folks feel like they're still getting ready.
Okay, we got some getting readies in the chat. Yeah. Great. So this is good. There's like, as long as you can acknowledge like where you are in the process, that's the first step to getting getting yourself on the road to resiliency. And so later we're going to go over a bunch of different options of things that you can try based on how you know both your organization, your capacity, and also your constituency and what would work best with them. And so these are things that you can build internally in the future. Okay, so let's talk about like the actual donor trends that we're seeing across philanthropy right now and how giving trends may affect like your future planning. Great. I'm gonna pop in a link to this survey here. Give me 1 second so I can pull it up so you all have the information that we got this from. This is actually from the Nonprofit Times, I believe. So this analysis just came out about what giving is looking like. And so what's really interesting is they looked at it both from like just a raw dollar standpoint, but also an inflation adjusted dollar standpoint. So that's what we were talking about before about year over year, the same money not being able to afford the same things, right? So just in general, US philanthropy, including individuals, corporate, government grants, the whole kit and caboodle went down $17 billion last year. And so have wanted to know, like, have you all felt that belt tightening? Because it's across all different sectors, like individual giving, folks donated 13.4% less than they did the year before last year when adjusting for inflation. And with foundation giving, the amount actually went up 2.5%, but the giving's ability dropped 5% with inflation adjusted dollars. And with foundation giving and also individual giving, we're seeing our country and our world at a precipice point across a number of different crises and rapid response areas, right? Whether you talk about bodily autonomy, reproductive justice, climate change, racial equity, right? There are so many worthy causes that we are seeing that are at like really heavy inflection points. And so a lot of people feel very compelled to give, but with less power to give, right? So it's actually driving up quote unquote competition. And because of the way foundations are set up, foundations don't have to give away all their money at once, and almost none of them do. There's a certain structure that like allows them to remain nonprofits if they give away a certain percentage of their endowment. But we're seeing a lot of foundations haven't gone above that threshold or met the moment by actually trying to give more. So yeah, just very curious how you all are seeing this shape out with your fundraising. Because as fundraising professionals, like we can feel it and we can see it when we're getting the no's or we're getting our priorities have changed, but explaining that to your board, explaining that to staff, especially when you kind of need to grow your budget at this time to be able to meet the needs of the work, meet the needs of your staff. It's a really, really big tension. So yeah, we're seeing in the chat some yeses. Pamela says we keep talking about the challenging fundraising landscape with our board, but this article really names it. Jennifer seeing some pushback from foundations. A long-term recurring donor has canceled their donation because they can't afford it anymore. Foundations shifting their priorities, trying to help those in need. The money's not going to museums. Yeah, that's also a big one too, Susan. Like, you even for like long-term, super dependable funders, sometimes foundations priorities change, and it's outside of even your favorite program officer's control. So things that you assume were like, it's been in the bag for 5-10 years now, You might wake up next year and that 25, 50, 100, whatever, however much thousand you depend on yearly is just not going to be there.
So one of the things that has served me, and I do admit I'm a total nerd about this stuff, which I guess is why I'm here. But one of the things that served me is when I understood how foundations worked, their tax structure, it allowed me actually to predict better when foundation funding fluctuations will happen. Try to say that 3 times fast. So what I mean by that is that the foundations by IRS rules must give away 5% of their endowment every year, right? So you would think, okay, that's just like a slice off the top. That's what they do. Actually, it's a moving average over 3 years. So whenever there is any volatility in the stock market or big giving, so when the pandemic hit, I reached out to folks that I knew and were like, yo, heads up, 2023 and 2024 are going to be bloodbaths with foundations. Squirrel away as much money as you can, because we know that when their giving went up, right, to meet the need, yay, good for them. They showed up a little bit. But what happens then is like either they have short memory spans, or maybe their accountants are like, we need to adjust, and this is how much money you have, because somebody is going to be looking at that moving average. And because they gave away, let's say 8% this year, over the next 2 years, they can give away significantly less than that 5%. If the stock market goes down after they gave that big jump, they can give away even less. So understand that that is a moving average. Watching trends in giving and also paying attention to the stock market actually makes you a little bit better at planning ahead. I don't like that I was right. The foundations started pulling away in 2023, and it looks like it's going to keep happening in 2024. But what does make me happy is that I, reached out to my friends in the business and also did my own fundraising to try to mitigate that, because I know sometimes folks just don't have time to really think about these things, and they're not nerding out at 3 o'clock in the morning when they can't sleep like I am. So, that's again, the get ready, be ready so you don't have to get ready shows up here, but also just understanding those mechanisms and what drives some of those decisions.
Yeah, that's really
shoot,
helpful
sorry.
insight, Paul. You okay?
Ready?
Yeah.
I forget that the tracking thing on my mouse is really, really
Super
touchy.
sensitive. Yeah. So now that we've kind of did a lay of the land and talked about like where we are in this moment, right? Let's talk about like organizing through dollars and framing resourcing positively. Because a lot of the time that is the biggest impediment for organizations to like really engage in independent revenue generation, is that tension and feeling of like asking small dollar donors, individuals, people who may even be in their constituency to invest in the organization. So let's talk about that a little bit. And I like to frame this under the sense of money is the root of all power, right? So we're looking at money as a total neutral thing, despite all the connotations positively and negatively for it. But we want to acknowledge that that tension between money and the movement is real. Many movements have been destroyed by money and greed, and a fair bit of skepticism surrounding money is very valid. This is a historical precedent. Whether you're a movement-based org, whether you're a traditional nonprofit who had, a shaky board or shaky EDs, or have heard those stories, or, even when it comes to like what we hear about it just in the public, the connotations of history with, even large-scale organizations like the Red Cross and the amount that they spend on admin costs and things like that. Because we're like soliciting money, there's an intrinsic belief, especially from the donor side, about like what is that money going towards, right? And because of that framework, us as like fundraising professionals sometimes have this like really difficult framing of like how do we ask folks for money when this tension is real and does exist. But we also do know that the only way to win whatever we're working on is through power. And the only way to gain power is to resource whatever you're doing, right? So a poorly resourced movement is a failed movement. We need the resources, we need the people, and we need the belief. They go hand in hand. So operating under all of these assumptions, we can correctly deduce that through developing new streams of income for your organization, you're actually building new forms of power, right? And so look at donations from individuals. It doesn't matter if it's all the way down to $1. Look at them as votes of confidence from the general public, from your constituency. That is the most direct way that me as an individual can engage with whatever you're doing as an organization, is to say, I believe in you so much, I'm going to give you money out of my pocket for you to further this work, right? And so since those donations are votes of confidence, we've talked about this in previous fundraising Fridays, but like, whose votes are you soliciting? Just big philanthropy or from your community? And community can mean anything, whether you're a movement-based organization, you're a traditional nonprofit, like you exist to serve a base, a mass base and a deep base. And you should connect with them and they should believe in you enough to want to see you continue to thrive and exist. And so that just wanted to lay out like what a lot of those tensions are around fundraising and the work that we do. Right. And so if we're operating under this framework, what we really need to do is look at small dollar solicitations as a request of solidarity, not, only is it about the dollar. You're getting support from your community. That's bolstering your people power. That makes your base bigger. Even if I know some folks operate in museums, right? If people are donating to your museum, that means that like you are now an institution in that community. People want to see this museum stay and thrive. It provides value, it provides knowledge, and it makes that community a better place. So it's not just only around like, movement-based or social justice organizations that we're talking about solidarity, right? And if people believe in you and your work, they'll be way more willing to introduce you to their networks and their people, right? And so that grows not only the reach of your organization, but the depth of your organization. It's actually quantifiable and scalable. And you then have the ability to turn their circles into members or deep-based supporters through that outreach. And then also for a lot of orgs, if you're working with a marginalized community, a low income community, whatever the case is, we just should shy away from removing the agency of potential donors, right? A lot of times, if you're working in smaller communities, like there's a innate feeling that like, you can't ask them to give, or you shouldn't ask them to give because they don't have a lot. But what that does is like infantile your constituents. Even if it's $1, it's an investment. By removing their agency to support your organization, you're actually limiting their levels of interaction with the organization and reinforcing problematic stereotypes, right? If you're working in a marginalized organization and you don't accept any money from them or don't solicit from them, but you're soliciting from people outside of that community to fund that work, as we said above, money is the root of all power. Who then are you listening to? Who's deciding, or influencing the work that you do? And then it also reinforces the capacity, the belief that folks in that community don't have the resources or the ability to invest in their own communities, because that's who your organization is there to serve, right? So we should just think deeply about how we think about money and organizing and building power within communities and the relationship between them, because often it can be a little bit difficult. But if we peel back the layers, there's some real solidarity and base building that can be done through fundraising, if it's viewed as a form of organizing. So just wanted to open that up for thoughts or reactions, or just talking about, your experiences of fundraising within your communities, and how you've been able to work on building power through fundraising. Because I think it's an interesting angle that a lot of people don't often frame it with. I'm sure we can. Be it can.
Yeah, so that's one of the, so we, again, the work my organization does is, it's pretty anti-capitalist. And so there's like this rejection of fundraising as a tool of, everything that my colleagues do not believe in. And so trying to get, stories from them, or trying to get them to engage in philanthropy and fundraising, I understand that resource organizing is, and raising money is a form of activism, but communicating that and teaching that to others I'm struggling with that, right? And similarly, like what you just said, small dollar solicitations are a request for solidarity, 1000%. We work with young people, and a lot of our member base is, mainly college students, and there has been this resistance to asking them for money, like asking them to give every month. But and there's like, oh, but what it does is it is removing the agency from them, because every chapter member I've spoken to has said that I dedicate my time to this work, and if I had to give like $5 a month to support it, like absolutely I do it. So I've struggled with getting my organization, or at least my colleagues, to understand that. And I'm totally going to ping you to see if there's like a short training or something you can do, if you can join one of our like brunch and learns, and just kind of unpack that, because 1000%, poorly resourced movements fail. And the reproductive justice movement is strong because of our supporters, especially because of a lot of the hate that also comes along with doing the work we do.
100%. I totally get that. And that's real. But I was in college. I know what I spent my $5 a month on. I could put it towards something else, something probably a little bit more noble, right? So it's there. It's just that barrier is so real. And we could talk all day about like what the like capitalist frameworks and those barriers for understanding of what resourcing is. And that's why, like, even just the words that we're using, right? Fundraising, donating, right? It's all framed around money, right? So even just flipping that and talking about resourcing the movement, right? Or resourcing your organization, now that opens up the door to include all the things that are already being like solicited from folks, right? So like for your college students, they're giving their time. Time is a cost, right? If anything, it's one of the most valuable things that you can give, because it's a finite resource, right? But we don't view that the same way as we would view an actual donation, right? But your organization literally cannot run without those folks dedicating the time that they do, right? So that should be acknowledged the same way that a gift should be acknowledged. So we need to like level from a strategic and from a mental standpoint, theoretically level all of these things, to say like these are just the different avenues that you can give to an organization, right? There's no right one, there's no wrong one, but we need all of them to be successful, right? So I think that even internally, like I know someone said above, for your board, yeah. you know, there's always like this difficulty, or like feeling like internally, like one, especially the money one, weighs more than the other ones, or is more valuable, right? They're all needed. And so we as fundraisers need to do some work of like trying to, like, whether it's those brunch and loans like you're talking about, do some education with internally with our staff around like how we look at resourcing and their role and their parts in it.
So I have
Pamela, oh yeah, go ahead, Polly.
I'm sorry, if somebody else has something they want to jump in on, please feel free.
Pamela just had a note in the chat that I just wanted to uplift, but go ahead, Polly, and then we'll get to that one.
One of my early moments of like stop taking agency away was fairly early in my fundraising career, and I was working with an organization that served folks with severe and persistent mental illness. All these folks were on SSI or SSDI, so very limited resources. We had the values of the organization meant that we had people who we served on our board right alongside major corporate leaders, you know, people who were making 7-figure salaries. And the board had a give-get policy. And because we had, you know, people that we served on the board, we didn't have a floor. We said it could be $1, and we hoped it would be many zeros after that for folks who could do many zeros after that. And when I made the pitch to the board and I received my donation slips back, one of our members submitted a donation slip for $1,000, and he was going to pay it out $83.33, whatever it was, a month out of his SSDI check. And I was like, you know, gobsmacked and floored. And I came up to him afterwards and I was like, I don't, you know, I hope I didn't pressure you. And I was like feeling just super, you know, heavy levels of guilt that I had done something wrong. And he was like, one, I do this every year. So you didn't pressure me. I've been doing this before you showed up. And two, he was like, you helped me. And right now I can afford to do this. When I can, I'll stop. And I, you know, and I was looking at our board list, and there are folks who could do 100 times that, who were doing that.
Hi there.
So
How are you?
I think it's really important to like
Good.
not
Sorry
make
to
these
bother
assumptions.
you. Thank you so much for calling.
So it's important that we not make assumptions about what people can do and what motivates them to do it. If I hadn't had to make that, if I hadn't had to pitch the board, I would have probably never asked him. And that would have been a huge mistake.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll give that a try. Thanks. Okay.
Angie, could you mute? Oh, thanks. Go ahead, Paul.
No, that was it.
Okay. So Pamela's note was about kind of like major donors. So an obstacle to engaging orgs and viewing fundraising as a form of organizing activism and agitating for change is a lack of connections to those who could make significant gifts, 25,000 or even 5,000. And that's super real. But, you know, I think sometimes when we look at individual donors, we look at it different than we look at institutional donors, right? So we all know, and I don't think that, you know, we necessarily have to or should, right? So we all know like the big fish of the world, the Ford Foundations, those type of foundations, right? If I start a nonprofit like today and I go immediately to the Ford Foundation, right? They have no idea who I am. I have no news around me, no motion, no anything, right? That chances are like I'm not gonna get that grant, right? If I'm working and I'm building power, and I start with local community family foundations, then my city-based, then my state-based foundation, and then maybe have another national foundation. By the time I get up to that stage, right? Now I have a portfolio of support behind me that makes what I'm looking at much more viable, right? The same thing applies to individuals, right? If you're building power within your community, right? It's it's viewing the people who are behind you. So to be honest, it's honestly more advantageous to have 25,000 people giving you $1 than one person giving you $25,000, right? One person giving you $25,000 as an individual giving program, that's a pet project. 25,000 people giving you $1 is a movement, right? You have 25,000 people behind you. So, we should definitely think deeply about, no gift really is too small. We should be engaging with folks because of building power and what they believe in. And you never know who those folks are. And if you invest in them, how they will invest in the organization back. You don't know their networks, you don't know who they know. And everybody's just a couple degrees of separation apart. So, not getting those is not a deterrent for not starting your program. Okay, great. Let's talk about some different donations. So let's highlight some of the different types of contribution programs that you can exist in. So different types of independent revenue generating programs are, you can do fee for service, which I know a lot of folks in the chat said that they were starting to experiment with, events, crowdfunding, membership programs, peer-to-peer fundraising, planned giving, matching giving programs, cause marketing, and then we have some more on the next slide. Sponsorship programs, community partnerships, merch sales, volunteering, and joint fundraisers. So oftentimes, we view it as like either or, right? You're either doing grants or you're just doing like an individual giving program or maybe a recurring giving program. But there's so many more avenues that you can like look at as possibilities and ways for you to engage with your constituency base, right? So, and your base better than anybody else. So there are some of these that are going to work probably particularly well, and some of these where it would be a heavier lift, right? And so through like knowing what's available and through knowing your base and who you would want to fundraise from, you can make a educated effort to pick IRGs that would work really well for your organization and in the context that you're working with. And then in the next section, I believe we will go a little bit deeper into like what all of these are, and we can also talk more about what you need to do to set them up and answer any questions about that framework. So for fee for service, any assets, programs, or services that are being created by your organization that are being used by other nonprofits, businesses, or government agencies can be charged for as long as it's under market rate. So as far as the IRS is concerned, you can run an organization as a business as long as it's under the market rate. And the difference is like the social, quote unquote, social good of the business, right? So if you're, for instance, giving trainings, if you're doing work in the community, if you're a food garden and you sell some produce, you know what I mean? Those are all things that technically you can raise money for your organization from, as long as it's under market rate. And market rate is, you can use different frameworks of what market rate is depending on what the item is, right? So that would be for like organizations that have something internally. Like a museum is a great example of this, right? They have something internally to like give back that can have a cost attached to it. Events are a great way of fundraising. All of us are like super familiar with like the galas and of the world, but there's so many more ways of engaging in event spaces that we don't really like frame as potential fundraising avenues, which I think really like limit our ability to think deeply and creatively about how we can engage with our constituency base. Like, for instance, Abia, you work with college students, right? College students probably aren't going to want to go to a gala, but a bar crawl or a house party are great ways to do fundraisers for folks that might actually attract folks in that age and that target demographic, right? Information sessions, performances, all happy hours. Yeah, exactly. All of these can be fundraising events, and we see them all the time. We just never relate them to our traditional like career workplaces, but these are real, and we know they're successful. And so think about like how you can engage with your constituency base in ways that make sense for you. Crowdfunding is another great way of potentially raising funds. So if you have a new program, a rapid response concern in your community, an emerging need, a crowdfunding campaign is really great to set up for these particular kind of frameworks, because they'll have a defined goal amount and an end date that also like spurs like people to give immediately because it's something they're responding to now. And it also allows you to increase and expand your donor base, because oftentimes folks who give to crowdfunding campaigns, they're going to share that on social media. They're going to share that with their networks. So eyes are going to be on your organization that you haven't really had a chance to penetrate in those circles before. And sometimes they can have like a viral effect, either within a community or in a larger group. Great. And then let's talk about membership programs. So a membership program is like pretty deeply tied to an individual giving program, but what you're going to do is you're going to provide different incentives and assets to folks who give into your membership program. So like oftentimes a good example of this is like a dues program. For folks who are familiar with that model, you like pay dues and then you have access to different and deeper engagements with the organization. And that can be around training, volunteer efforts, or engagement. But what this does is it allows your donors to develop a higher affinity for your organization because you're doing deep level relational work. Abia, yes, I see a hand.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
So in terms of members, I see donors as members, right? And I want to offer them, and our donors are across the country, across the all ages, all backgrounds, everything. But
Mhm.
the actual organization, our mission is focused on young people between the ages of 18 and 30, centers Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, non-binary, queer, trans. And so when I say member, the program team is like, yeah, that's our young people. How do I, so if can I just use the word member and have like a separate segment for like everyone else versus the actual communities we're serving? And if so, what kind of benefits could I offer a donor who might be, who might not be able to attend an event, and who might be like all over the place? Even our trainings and our programming is tailored towards our young people. So does that mean as development, I create like quarterly teach-ins or quarterly events, giving access to members as kind of like an in? Yeah, I'm just curious about that. And I was actually looking at Pamela's organization right now, National Immigration Project, and they do like a really good job of listing out their member benefits. What kind of benefits could I offer an individual donor who might be out of our like demographic, but cares about reproductive justice? If you have any thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I used to work at a youth-based climate justice organization. And so their constituency base was like solely and like very explicitly young people. But because of their growth in notoriety, adults, older folks, people with wealth wanted to give and wanted to figure out how to engage with the organization. So the majority of the programming was centered around like the youth because that's their main constituency. But what they did was build out and think deeply about different ways that like folks who are maybe parents could engage or grandparents can engage with the organization. So whether that's like you know, a one-on-one political learning or training program that's virtual, that's catered or geared towards like an older generation or like a different type of demographic, right? Or it's you know, different types of like lunch and learns or come volunteer or things like that, right? So, you know, similarly is how we would break out a donor base based on like how much they give. You know what I mean? You have your small, your mid, and your large and your like major donors. You can break out a donor group by any demographic, right? So if it's age that's the major determinant of like how you interact with donors, then that can be your determinant, right? So your young people would be like your essentially your small donors, right? And you build a program around them. And then like mid-tier, because you're going to want to continue to have these young people engage with your organization as they graduate out of college and stuff like that. So then build out a program for like young professionals that like how do they engage with the work that you're doing. And then, you know, for like maybe you know, you're a little bit older folks or grandparents or whoever the case may be, have something structured around them. So you can really just use this like super creatively. It's not like, you know, the money is the determining factor of how you look at them. If the age and like who they are as a person is more important to your organization, frame your membership program around that and think deeply about like how they can jump in and jump out of the work in ways that are meaningful for them.
I would also suggest that you do like some navel gazing around what organizationally, how you define the words that you use. So you know, if member is really tied to an age group, what happens to the what are those folks considered when they age out? Do you stop caring about them? I mean, if you've built a relationship and you've got them to care about the cause, and you know, like what is your plan to keep them active, because the movement has still has needs. So if you then start thinking differently or have different strata, as Kafili was talking about, with different constituents, then you can start making plans around them. So typically membership, with a lot of organizations that I've encountered, membership is about behavior and not necessarily dollars. There are other groups that membership is only about dollars. But if the behavior is because these folks responded to a call to action, how are you defining a call to action? In my world, asking somebody to chip in money is responding to a call to action just as much as asking them to show up to a protest, sign a petition, fill out a survey, contact a representative. And so if it's a matter of like, we all just need to get on the same page and say an action is an action and therefore member is a member, then let's get on the same page about that. If it's that we are age-based because that's part of mission critical, what do we do with folks who've aged out? And what do we do with folks who are affiliated? So like parents of young people can't necessarily give a lot of money, but they sometimes can ask mom and dad, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, whoever, to pitch in, and giving them credit for their ability to bring in other donors is an important thing to do, also while honoring those donors as individuals as well. So thinking about these things really does help you be a little bit more three-dimensional in the way that you interact with your people as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I think we still have one more on that page, Paul.
Oh, I'm
The
sorry.
previous one. Yeah, no worries. Peer-to-peer fundraising. So we're all like super familiar with this model too, right? So, you know, whether people are running a 5K or doing some sort of challenge, even a new one that is growing increasingly lucrative for organizations are, if you're familiar with people playing video games online and having streaming charities, right? These are all different forms of having donors raise money from their circles that can go into your organization and have seen like very high levels of success. Again, it just depends on who your demographic bases and who you want to talk to. If you have young people, maybe streaming might be a good look for you. You know, marathons for like maybe some tradition, like some of the older folks who are like used to stuff like that, or all sorts of different you know, challenges that you can set up that are based around your constituency group. And planned giving. So with older donor bases, planned giving and bequests are like a form of having guaranteed future income for your organization. These would be like, you know, highly personal asks that you would set up with like long-term donors who have been supporting your organization for a number of years. But it's a conversation that you can have with folks, you know, especially maybe around like they're approaching retirement age and they're in trying to figure out what they're going to do with their money or heading into retirement. Those are conversations that you can have with folks in developing a program around it. Matching gift programs. So many orgs like just leave a ton of money because they don't like just ask on their donation form, like, does your employer have a matching gift program? Like, yes or no. That little box, like putting that on your online portal can get you hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're currently missing out on. So many orgs have matching gift programs, or like even if you don't know whether your org has your job has a matching gift program, being asked that and being prompted to might get some people to go like, huh, actually, I don't know. Let me check. Because if I believe in you enough to give money to you and I can get more free money for you, why wouldn't I do that? So, you know, incorporate that in your online portal form. You know, just a simple yes, no would go a long way in helping your development staff also know like, oh, I can reach out to this person with their donor acknowledgement letter. And maybe that's a different template where in the letter it says, you attach a form of like, okay, so who's your employer? How do we get in contact with them and initiate the matching gift? You know, and then cause marketing, another one that like we're all super familiar with, is putting a name to it. Collaborating with local businesses, big or small, for a portion of profits. Great way to connect with your community. You know, especially now, even as a larger organization, larger companies have ERG programs where different demographic groups, especially around certain times of the year, want to do lunch and learns, want to do different forms of programming to help support their organization. Like internally, you should have good frameworks about who you would want to partner with, who you wouldn't want to partner with. But like, for instance, I'm working with a trans-led organization right now out in California, and they have a lot of success doing ERG work, lunch and learns with corporations around Pride Month. You know, so think about like your organization's calendar. If you have a focused demographic, things that you can work around, and whether it's on a local level or something larger, doing a cause marketing campaign. Sponsorship, again, it could be like this can be partnered especially with the events that we were talking about before, having local businesses or other partners be sponsors or partners in public facing programming can reduce the cost or eliminate the cost of you throwing those. So it could end up being that you know, you can have a cost-free event and then it's all profit on the back end from the donations, right? So thinking about who your constituency is, who your demographic is, and like who markets products to that group that would make sense for that event. And so there are ways of connecting those dots and being able to try and reduce the costs that you have with setting up those type of programs. Another one is like community partnerships. So partnering with businesses, schools, and the community for joint fundraising efforts can help reduce costs and also increase donor bases through information sharing agreements. So like if someone donates and they split the donation between both parties, but like both parties get the information access to the donor. And then Merchandise. Merch is a big one that we all know about. But it's a great way still to increase brand visibility and raise money at the same time. You have a really awesome logo, you're able to put that on a t-shirt, a hat, whatever the case is. Especially if you're a local organization, it really helps build brand awareness, and show that you have a presence in a community. And the last couple, volunteering. Lots of large companies offer donations to organizations that provide volunteer opportunities for their employees. So if you are an organization where like folks can come and like do some work with your organization with a low lift, look into partnering with some companies that offer those type of donations for like hours worked. And they often either will provide that in a direct donation or just in a grant. And then finally, a joint fundraiser. There's so many like-minded organizations out there, and we all feel like we're competing for the same dollar. But adopt an abundance mindset. Work on a joint fundraiser with a like-minded organization. It could be in the same exact focus area or something that might be intersectionally attached, right? And that would allow you to create larger donor bases, share information, and improve your chances of success. Instead of throwing two events with like a smaller imprint, you could throw one large event, get some sponsors, you know what I mean? Make it a bigger thing, have a larger impact than you ever would have been able to create for that cost by yourself. So these are a bunch of different ways that you can think about donor acquisition and resourcing your organization outside of just individual solicitation or government or institutional grants. We have a little bit of time left, so just wanted to open it up. I think, is that the last slide? Yeah, just wanted to open it up for some okay, great. Susan, as a staff of one, can you suggest one or two things that I can do? I can't do it all. 100%. So definitely not suggesting that you go out and start like all these programs at the same time. That is impossible. What I would say is one of the easiest lifts for a staff of one, if you're already doing individual donations, I think a membership program would be a great way, because what you're doing is really just like deepening and growing your individual giving program, right? And by building those relationships, you'll be able to learn more about what your donors actually want. So if then through those communications, you can kind of build organically off of what you're hearing, right? If they're like, oh, we want more volunteer opportunities, we can do that. Or, oh, it would be lovely if we had an event once a year, everyone could get together and talk about our work and celebrate the work. Then, okay, cool. Maybe like next year we can start thinking about some sort of gala or whatever the case may be, right? So I think that would be the easiest launching off point to build something organic.
I'm curious, what appeals to you in the things that we've talked about so far? Being a staff of one, what feels manageable? If you're talking, you're on mute. Anybody else like to jump in on what feels like something they might try sooner rather than later?
I can go first. So we just, our digital campaigns manager just started working 3 days ago. And so one of the projects that I'm going to be working, that I've basically been waiting for them to join in terms of capacity, is to create deep engagement opportunities for our donors. And I think I might not call them members. I might find another word for it, just so that I don't, program team isn't like, yo, that's our word. But maybe, come up with a cool name, like for our monthly donors, or, donors who have been giving to us consistently, and invite them to, be a part of a cohort, like political education cohort or something. And then the digital campaigns manager is the one who can support with the interactive piece to it. So I think starting really simple and small with our existing donor base, and just inviting them to deepen their engagement, and then depending on the response we get, make it a membership program. That's something that just it sounds hard, but it actually isn't, because we meet regularly anyways, And then another thing I'm definitely going to do is I'm going to reach out to you, Polly, and I'm going to ask you to get to schedule a training or something for my team. We really need to see fundraising as resource organizing. It's such an important shift that movement organizations definitely need.
Abiha, this is Pamela. We've been chatting on the side. I just wanted to challenge that programmatic fundraising split, but maybe that will come from the training you get. But you said the political team would be that's our area. Well, maybe they should get involved in cultivating dues paying members by offering some kind of political analysis or something, that people pay, and so I was telling Abiha that as the development person for a long time, I was managing both our membership program, which accrued benefits, because we work in the immigrant rights space with immigrant rights attorneys. So attorneys would join as members, but I managed that from the development and donors. And eventually we were able to grow to where membership is sort of more managed somewhat programmatically. There's just a different admin team that manages membership. So when you it sounds like first everyone on the staff needs to see bringing money in as one of their core responsibilities. And when you get there, maybe eventually some programmatic content for members. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, it makes sense. We have an integrated voter engagement program, and we have canvassers out there in the communities talking to people about reproductive justice issues. And if I can just find a way to convince them to also talk about how they can support URGE if they don't want to, sign up today or something, I think, or maybe find a way to take those names, take those emails, and start cultivating them. I do think that would really go a long way. So thank you for saying that, Pamela.
So Pamela, you put in the note, in the chat, that while you feel, moved by the concept of having 25,000 $5 donors, you really need, some large donors. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about that. And I'm hoping that I can, and maybe me and Kafili can try to help convince you of the value of going the other direction.
Well, as I was saying, we're an immigrant rights and legal organization. So we work with a lot of small private practitioner attorneys who are out there trying to fight for their clients and get them out of detention and get them back. It's a miserable landscape, and the situation for immigrants is just abhorrent. So, and they're not necessarily in philanthropy, I guess they're the legal community, so maybe they're a slightly well compensated community, but so a lot of our donors are actually attorneys who kind of are members and use our services. And I feel like it's taken so much. And then some of the big foundations you've mentioned, the more immigrant rights ones, there's only a few, and they're funding all of the immigrant rights organizations. So it feels hard sometimes, and almost by happenstance, that we've attracted some people who are just philanthropic and are happy that there are attorneys out there that are really fighting hard in the courts for their clients. And so it's we have law students and we have retired law professionals. We have a lot of people, our retired membership rate is $30 a year if you're retired. I mean, it feels exhausting to keep, and with saying, we have 1,500 members or 2,000 members or 2,500 members, it gives us more power in advocacy spaces with congressional leaders, because we have dues paying members in 48 states. Like we can tout that, but in terms of the money side, it's exhausting. Like, knowing that some people in tech can give $25,000 without even really, it would just go so far for a small organization. So, and it's just hard. I think I've been saying, we don't have the connections. We need to prospect, we need to fill the pipeline. People are retiring, we're seeing exactly that philanthropy, a nonprofit quarterly article, Chronicle philanthropy article, whatever, that the funding landscape has gotten harder. And it's like, we've got to find the progressive, and we're we work on some of the most I don't know what to call it, radical, difficult immigration issues that a lot of many organizations don't deal with because it's just unpopular.
Totally get that.
Like people who are entangled in the criminal legal system, dealing with breaking the crimmigration nexus, things people don't want to talk about crime and immigration. A lot of places they just don't, let's just stick with, young people who came as children and are innocent, quote unquote, like that that's not our organization at all.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think going forward, one thing that you can think about too is framing the development of that base as that recruitment tool, right? So you're already doing the amazing work. You just have to get knowledge of your work to these folks, right? One thing that's really awesome, or well, I don't know if awesome is the right word for this, but the legal field is especially around certain issues, is pretty insular, right? And so there's only so many degrees of separation between you and the folks that you really want to get to when you especially start talking about school affiliations and things of that nature, right? So developing a membership program around young lawyers who are engaging with your work and who believe in your work, and then part of that responsibility in that program is to go back to your university on alumni day and speak about this work or do something like that. You don't know who's going to be in the room, how that word is going to spread, you know what I mean? So that's really the key of the membership program. Is it's not only a retention program for your current donors, but it's a recruitment program for future donors, right? Which is where you're trying to get to. So yeah, the example I gave before about having 25,000 small donors is better than one big donor, but getting to that one big donor is built off of the precipice of having the 25,000 small donors, right? Because it looks real, it looks investable, it looks, like something that is winning out there, right? And so they'll be much more likely to put their money towards that rather than even if you found that person, making the ask right now, if it's a smaller thing or you can't make the argument the same way, may be a little bit more difficult. You know what I mean? Polly, do you have any suggestions around that?
Totally. I have worked with legal services organizations a bunch, and on issues that are tricky. So there's some things that I can, there's things specifically about attorneys that you can think about. One, which is, but there are also generalizations that we should make about donors, and that is useful to sort of just put in the back of your brain. So one of those generalizations about donors is that the first gift you get from anyone is the smallest gift they will make to you, typically. So if somebody comes in at $5, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will stay at $5 or that is their capacity. It is just, it's their amuse-bouche with your organization. It's their test. They're giving you a taste, and you should just sort of, think of it that way. These folks are sticking their toe in, whatever analogy works for you. And I need to I need to get more friendly, let them see more, give them opportunities to connect better. So they'll feel comfortable jumping in with both feet. So one, like, don't be discouraged. Like I try not to be discouraged when I'm in your position. I try not to be discouraged by the size of the small gifts that come in. I just look at that as like, great, you're on my hook. I'm now reeling, and it's not you're now my donor to lose if I don't do my job. Right. So there's that. So keep just, one, keep that in mind. Two, about attorneys specifically. In many states, attorneys have to do continuing legal education to be able to keep their bar, to remain barred in that state. Lots of legal services programs create opportunities like maybe you do some trainings already on the legal immigration system, the effects, blah, blah, blah. You know this better than anything that I would possibly know. Doing trainings that you can give CLE credits to now gives you a package that you can go to a law firm and say, so in DC, for example, where I live, attorneys have to get 50 continuing legal education credits a year to remain barred. So every year, there's somebody in the law firm whose job is to make sure everybody gets their credit. So what I did when I was working in legal services organizations is I reached out to all those law firms and said, we'll come to you and do a training for as many attorneys as you want to put in that room for 10 grand or 20 grand or however many, or we do a dollar amount per attorney. They now get their CLE credits up. They get their attorneys never leave the office, which is important for the companies. And you're now building relationships in those companies. What we would do at the end of those trainings is pitch to see if any of those attorneys would like to join our pro bono program. We would also then pitch to see if any of them would like to become donors. So we get money for the firm. We signed up attorneys for our pro bono program, and we got some of those attorneys to become donors. There's always a way to move up the scale. That process allowed us to get one of our law firms to then sponsor our organization in a mega way, where we had the law library organizing our legal files so that they were compliant with the rules that we had fallen behind on. Apparently, I wasn't aware of. They had folks doing Canned Good Drive to help support our, like the constituents that we served. And there was tons of things that firm stepped up to do. And the firms created an annual contribution to the organization, in addition to the payment that we receive fee of service for the trainings that we did. Yes, sole practitioners, might be broke. You might be asking a lot of them. But you should still ask them to give, and ask them to broaden their network. Attorneys are connected to lots of other attorneys. They might not be attorneys who care passionately about the issue, but they might care about the issue enough to, support it. Have them do a house party. Invite 10 of their friends who work at big firms who are getting those, fancy 6-figure checks, and they can then talk about what it's like to be part of this organization and to do the work that they're doing and why it's important. And then they pitch their friends to become donors. So a major donor program in a legal services organization, or any type of program, can be built out of your membership, out of your volunteer program, and out of lots of different tentacles of your work. You just have to start thinking that the people you're connected to have access and want to help, rather than don't, make sure you're not using your biases, stereotypes, or whatever to think that folks don't want to have time, have access, don't have means. You just never know. It's our job to ask. It's their job to decide. Soapbox off. Anybody else have some final thoughts before we call it another fundraising Friday to a close?
Oh, whoops. We should update that slide. That was my bad.
Oops.
For the, for the next one. I was so focused on the content, y'all. That's my bad. I can tell you right now what our next session is. So it'll be on the 14th, it looks like, of July, and we will be going over authentic storytelling. Yeah, so as always, you can find this again on the YouTube page once we get that uploaded. And really looking forward to seeing y'all in a couple weeks. Have a great weekend, and please, 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 people are already signing up, but make sure you take advantage of the one-on-one sessions. All right, have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.